Oh, a premium. Sorry, we have started Prospects After Dark and Friends, but just a little thing about our good friends over at Twitter. It says a premium account on Twitter is required to create live broadcast on their platform. Please upgrade to a premium subscription to stream. So this will not be streamed on Twitter or X. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Prospects After Dark with Friends. I am Kyle Reese. I guess I'll be your host. Something I'm definitely not qualified for, but hopefully you're not here to see me or talk to me. I'm just going to ask some questions and chime in every once in a while, but I am honored and excited to try something a little different and to be here with two people that I have wanted to talk with exclusively for an audience specifically I would say at least 2 years now. So without further ado, I will introduce my first guest. His name is Blake Newberry. He's the beautiful man at the bottom down there. He writes for the Cardinal Nation and for Viva Alberto's, and he's handsome. And that's Blake. Blake, say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with Kyle on not an exclusive episode of Pad, because I assume there will be more of these, but for the first time making a guest appearance on it should be fun.
Yeah, and then, of course, America's sweetheart is on the top right-hand corner up there. Kareem, he's everywhere now. He's got some Prospects Live ties. He's doing some media stuff over on Instagram. I mean, our boy is everywhere, and we'll have him until a major league organization snatches him up, I'm sure. But you know him as Kareem. Kareem, how are you this evening?
Doing great, Kyle. It's good to be on with you too. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm excited. You know how this works. What is everyone drinking before we get into this? I'll start with you, Blake.
I am drinking an old-fashioned. It's my drink of choice. Can't find it. There we go.
What's your bourbon of choice?
So typically, right now I'm drinking Willet, which I've never had, but I was gifted a bottle of it. Awesome. So very much enjoy it. Typically, I try to shop around like some ryes, and I like rye in my old-fashioned, and try to find what I like best from there. Sazerac rye has been a recent go-to.
Good man. When I make them, I usually don't do rye. My brothers love rye old fashioned, rye Manhattan. I am just a standard bourbon. I've been on an Old Forester kick lately. I love all of the Old Forester, so I'll kind of juggle those. But Kareem, what are you drinking, my friend? You got a water? You got a Gatorade? What kind are you sipping on?
Just a old-fashioned water.
An old-fashioned water, right out of the well, right out of the tap. Do you? All kidding aside, is it tap water? Is it does it go through a filter of any sorts? What's your water drinking preference?
Kyle, did you say all kidding aside, then ask if it was tap water?
Look, I'm a genius. This is why I am doing this. Okay, I'm the host, Blake. You're gonna just step back. Okay, no, yes, I did, and then I thought, why the hell did you just say that? What are you doing?
Oh, my bad. Sorry, go ahead, Kareem.
Bottled water. I'm not sure what company, but it's bottled water.
Awesome. Yeah, so again, I guess we'll kind of get into it. I have had a really busy last couple of weeks, specifically the last week or so. And I have not consumed 1 ounce of minor league baseball in this past week, for probably the first time in season in years. So what I was hoping that you guys would do is just give me your maybe couple of highlights or singular highlight from the last week of minor league action. Some of the things that stuck out with you, and it doesn't have to be, it can be. It doesn't have to be the high end stuff like Weatherholt's exit velocities, which I hope we do talk about. But it could be something different, like Nick Dunn went to tag somebody and got punched in the face. Like I just want the things that kind of stood out to you, and I would like to start with Kareem if that's possible.
Yeah, so Matt Koperniak just had a 5-for-5 performance, 3 doubles. It was actually the first 5-hit game in the Cardinals minor leagues since Chandler Redmond did it a few years ago in his historic home run cycle game. And I thought that was really cool, just seeing Koperniak have a 5-hit game. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this after, but I kind of wish he got a shot instead of Victor Scott. But we can talk about that later. And another thing that really stood out to me was Chase Davis. It was his first week at high A, and he just continued to, match since June. He's just been a, steady force in the lineup for Palm Beach and now Peoria. WRC plus is pretty much 160 since the start of June. slashing 300, 394, 524. So, I mean, this guy is just hitting the ball very well right now, and it's good to see his success translate over to a higher level. And I wanted to ask you guys a question about Chase Davis. If he continues what he's done since June in Peoria, do you think this is a guy that should get consideration for top 100 lists?
Ooh, I'll go first. I do. Especially top 100 lists always seem to favor those players that have the prospect cachet. So it's usually easier for those guys to find their way into a top 100, especially with now I give everybody that puts out top 100s a lot of credit because they do their homework. There's a lot more data involved. So if he's hitting the ball hard and he's playing a good outfield, I do think he will. What do you think, Blake? And then from there, you can take it to the things that stood out to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is a guy who's always had the tools, and we just saw him struggle in single A for a while now. And then he makes swing changes, changes his setup at the plate, and now all of a sudden he's raking. He's always been a guy who's fast, plays a good outfield, has range, can steal bases, can hit the ball really hard. Like, if he's somehow managed to, hit the ball with more consistency and to actually learn how to hit the ball and at good angles with more consistency, this is absolutely a guy who should be a top 100 prospect.
What do you, real fast, Blake, before you go on with the things that stood out with you, what do you think, Kareem? Do you think he's lined up for it?
I do think so. If he can continue this, it doesn't even have to be a 160 WRC plus pace per se. If it's 130 even, I think he should at least be starting to get consideration as long as, the strikeout rates haven't been too high. He's walking a ton. The quality of contact is there, which, coming out of the draft, there were some concerns with him, just how he would translate with wood bats. But I think, what we've seen the past few months, he's really put that to rest. This is a guy that can do damage with wood bats. And just to talk a little bit more about his batting stance, we saw him in spring training drastically change it.
Yep.
And, it just didn't suit him. Just watching him, he didn't look comfortable. He has made changes over the course of the year, but they aren't super drastic. He still has that leg kick. The changes are more so with his leg placement. He had a very stretched out, his legs were very stretched out in college, but now they're very, they're closer together. And his stance is honestly closer to Carlos Gonzalez than what it was in college. He looks if you compare their swings right now, it's dead similar. It's crazy.
Yeah, he really loosened up and got to some of that athleticism. And also hat tip to you, Kareem, for putting on Twitter, on X, putting the video next to each other of how his stance has changed in just a month. What do you think, Blake?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I mean, the spring training thing was super interesting to me because when we saw Chase Davis, it was shocking how different he looked in spring training. And it makes sense to me that they would almost try to tweak his swing as much as they did in spring training, as almost hey, this isn't working. Let's do something completely drastic so you can feel the difference and then kind of dial it back. That's it's a training technique that coaches sometimes like to use. And I think it makes sense that that's something that they really tried out in spring training. We saw Chase Davis back off of it after the season started. He almost went completely back to his old swing. And now he's kind of piecemealed his way into a swing that looks similar and has made some slight changes, but isn't quite as drastic as he showed in the spring. And you're right, Kareem, what you said earlier. I think it completely suits him as opposed to what he tried to do earlier, and the results speak for themselves.
I'm really anxious to see how these last 2 months go, especially with a lot of the high end prospects. It's been such a weird year for the high end prospects. Roby getting hurt, Jerby getting hurt. All of the pitchers kind of being kind of weird and not really having success. Before we get into one of the pitchers, who I definitely want to talk about, McGreevy. I want to talk about Michael McGreevy's debut. I think it's important. Blake, tell us what has stood out to you about the past week on the farm.
So I've got three things. I think the Chase Davis thing is interesting, but then you hear about Victor Scott changing the swing and adding the leg kick to try to add more power. And I think it's really cool when you have two of these guys who are some of the top prospects in the system who really were struggling and who have really made intentional efforts to tweak their swings to try to address whatever issues they were having and have seen success after doing so. So I think that has been one of the real highlights for me, even though I actually would prefer Victor Scott. Wasn't on the Major League roster at this point. I think it's still cool to see that the tweaks that he's made and the success that he's had because of it. But then I also look at some of the draftees and seeing a guy like Ian Patrutz come into single A and just hit literally everything he sees is amazing. And the guy literally just cannot make an out right now if he tried. It's so much fun to watch. And then Nolan Sparks, I think 13th rounder, he's a guy like coming out of a small school we didn't really have a lot of data on. So getting him to make a couple of appearances, especially since the Cardinals usually take college pitchers and don't throw them the entire season after they get drafted, it's been cool seeing him come in and actually give us some StatCast data on his pitches and to see that he actually has some like legitimately intriguing stuff.
Yeah, I love all those. I cannot wait to get to Sparks and Pitcherets. I remember when we were talking in our group chat, I was like, that guy's annoying. Like, you could tell he was going to be annoying, and he has been annoying so far in like the best kind of way. I guess, my initial plan was to get into McGreevy, but I think we all have something on our minds that we would all kind of like to address. And it's funny because we haven't even mentioned it to each other. It's the Victor Scott promotion, right? Kareem, I'll throw it to you, but I think for me, I'm torn about the Victor Scott promotion. I think the Cardinals lack center field depth, and I guess it's just a matter of like how confident and comfortable they feel with Newt and Pham having a potential share of center. So I understand why they called it Victor Scott, but I think you and I share the same, at least. I haven't really heard Blake's thought, but I wish they would have gone a different direction. It's tough with Koperniak because he's a left-handed bat, which is really the toughest thing. But it would have been nice to see somebody like Koperniak get a chance, especially because he's hot, especially because he's been hitting well for a year and a half, almost 2 full years, making adjustments against lefties. But what do you think?
I just think Scott, he's in a good spot right now, just with the recent swing change. He's having a lot of success at AAA, and he hasn't had any success all year. So I think it's good just to build his confidence, have some success, even if it's at the AAA level. And that's not to say he's going to come up in the major leagues and, the streaks all over or whatever, but I just like the rhythm he was in. It's a new swing. I just wish the Cardinals had some center field options. Like, I think a lot of this is just a problem with roster construction, that you don't feel anyone besides, Siani and Scott are capable of playing center field on a regular basis. I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think that's where I understand why the Cardinals called up Victor Scott. But then I look at it from the other lens, which is the more like prospect development lens. And Victor Scott was absolutely rushed to the majors. Just no doubt about it, rushed to the majors. They send him back to AAA. He has like 2 weeks of success, and then he's back in the majors. Like, I would love to see this guy just sit in AAA, actually get into his new swing, as opposed to tweaking his swing, having like 2 weeks of success, and now like, hey, have fun facing major league sweepers and changeups as you try to adjust fully to your new swing. Like, I would have loved to see him just have some more consistency. And I get that the Cardinals want to have a legitimate center fielder, but Victor Scott is also somebody who, while he has the potential to play an amazing center field, he's just not there yet with his reads. And I know, Kyle, I think I saw on Twitter, you said he looks like he's gotten better reads and better jumps off the bat, like here and there, and that helps, but he's still not like the Michael Siani center fielder that he could become, where he's an elite defensive center fielder. At best, he's probably average still, unless he's drastically improved there, which means like Lars Nootbaar, I mean, I know they probably don't consider him a center field option really long term, but over the course of his career, he's basically been an average defensive center fielder. Like, I would almost rather have him play center field at the same level as Victor Scott at this point in their careers and call up a right-handed bat. I don't know who that is. That could be Thomas DeJacy to go play like second base against lefties, and then Donovan goes and plays the outfield with Newt, and then you at least have another right-handed bat lineup instead of Victor Scott.
Yeah, it's funny. We talk about roster construction, especially roster depth within the minors and how it affects the majors. They've got the same issue at shortstop as they have with center field, right? Like, they're clinging on to Brandon Crawford, hoping that he can be there, even though he's below average, just as backup to Mason Wynn. Mason Wynn might be their most important part, not because of his talent or because of his skill, but because if he gets hurt, the Cardinals are in a hole. They don't really have anybody else they can go to, right? It's Thomas DeJacy, who's maybe flashes average as a defensive shortstop and not consistently enough. And then you're hoping Jeremy Rivas and then JJ Weatherholt, and that's kind of what you have. Ramon Mendoza. There's a couple other guys that have some talent there, but it's not enough. It's not enough to get them through hard times at the major leagues. which could happen. But I really think the Victor Scott thing is interesting. I do hate the fact that he's just incorporated more athleticism into his swing. Kareem, I remember at Blogger Day, you and I were talking. We were talking about Chase Davis, and we were talking about Victor Scott and about how they need to get in. We didn't say athleticism. We were just, both of us were talking about like just change things a little bit, like get that lower half working a little bit more with both of those guys. And we're seeing it, and we're seeing them have success. And to Blake's point, I hate the idea that, all right, here's we're gonna have you bunt a lot. Welcome to the majors. Here's the bunt stick. Go ahead and do that. And then also here's sweepers, and they're terrible and they're devastating. And have some fun with those too. But I guess so. I think we're all in the same boat there. Hopefully, he has enough success over the last couple of weeks to propel him until Siani's ready. If Siani gets ready or is ready at the minor league, success of the minors to take him to the next level in the majors. We do have a couple comments over on YouTube I want to go over before we get to McGreevy. Grave of Einstein mentions the only thing I will pay premium for are things I can't mention in Twitch chat. Yeah, we talk about that a lot. Stu Styles, our good friend, says the lads. I will make a point. I want to cheers. I'm drinking a Four Hands Oktoberfest because nothing says a Cardinals loss on August 5th like Oktoberfest. Everybody's getting ready to, shut it down for October. So to Stu Styles, to all the pad people, to you gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Cheers to you guys. Thank you. We'll see how that goes. Our YouTube chat, rather. I get you. Prospects After Dark with Friends. Aaron says hello. Kareem. Oh, here's a good one. Big Ol' Buck says Kareem looks so innocent and sweet. That's why he's America's sweetheart. I don't know what Jeff Niehaus means by bust out the Swiss, but I'm assuming it's cheese. I had guests once, Tara Wellman, Aaron Johnson asked Kyle, have you ever had guests? I did it once with Tara Wellman. She jumped on for a little bit, and that was it. Aaron Johnson says, I wonder when the shirts come off with the guests. I will have my shirt on until Kareem or Blake takes their shirt off. As a guest or as a host, it's my duty to make you guys feel comfortable enough to take your shirts off, and then I will follow suit. Now, if that means I have to take my shirt off first, I'll do it. Okay. I'll do it, but it's up to you guys. I'll need like a little wink and a nod to let me know when to go. And then just a couple other things. Jake Wood, who I think all of us have, we were all on Jake's show, his podcast. He says taking notes on how to do interviews properly. Where I'm already taking questions and going to comments. I'm terrible at this. Talking about Koperniak, Big Ol' Buck says he should have gotten the call in his opinion. Aaron Johnson says, I was at the Bulls Redbirds game on Saturday night. Good to see Jay walk, but he just banged more into the ground. I know he's doing better, though. I do. Part of the reason I want to, real fast, Adam McBonney says, I know how, I want to know what Kareem thinks about Chen Wei-Lin's off speed. I'm going to make a little note of that. Chen Wei. But I want to talk about Walker a little bit, because I think it's interesting that we talked about Victor Scott and we've talked about Chase Davis both getting to a little bit more lower half athleticism. And again, I didn't get to watch minor league baseball at all this last week, but it definitely seemed to me that there was a little bit more athleticism in Mr. Walker's swing. And again, I'm just seeing highlights, so I can't say. But is that something that either of you picked up on? Blake, did you see anything?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He just looks almost more comfortable at the plate, and just like he looks like he's just activating some of the natural athleticism he has. Sometimes he's looked really just stiff at the plate, and even sometimes in the field too. And I feel like he's gotten better about that, at least in like the last 2 or 3 weeks.
What about you, Kareem? Have you seen anything? Does it just kind of seem like it's the same, or it's hard to say when you're just seeing highlights, and that's all I've seen over the last week.
I haven't noticed anything drastic, but I have heard some rumblings of him having somewhat of his swing change. So it'll be something I follow for sure.
Awesome. Well, we'll go to our good friend Adam McBanney over at Viva Alberto's. He says, I want to know what Kareem thinks about Chen Wei-Lin's off-speed. Kareem, what are your thoughts on Chen Wei-Lin's off-speed pitches?
Yeah, is he talking about the changeup or all of his pitches? Off-speed pitches.
I will say for me, it's his changeup is really the only off-speed pitch I care about. Yeah. I think he's got some interesting stuff, but I don't think he commands anything. He doesn't command anything other than the fastball and the changeup particularly well. I guess you talk about the changeup, and then you talk about some of the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, his changeup is performed as one of the top pitches in single A. Hitters aren't doing any damage against it, and the whiff rates are very high. It's a pitch 88 miles an hour, 7 inches of induced vertical break off of his fastball with similar horizontal break. I've talked to Adam a little bit about this, but in terms of just pitch profile, it might not stand out, but I mean, we have to notice like how it's performing and, take that into consideration as well. And besides the changeup, like the slider, I'm honestly not a fan of the pitch. It's he doesn't spin the offering very well. It's like around 83, 84 miles an hour. The velocity has ticked up a little bit from what it was at the start of the season, but it's still not an offering I'm crazy about, even though the results are decent, not quite as good as the changeup. And there's another weird thing about Chen Wei-Lin. He will have a slider or changeup, whatever. Like he'll have a pitch that registers as one of those two, but it'll be very low spin. And I'm kind of curious about that because I have heard that he throws a splitter. Is that the splitter? I'm not sure. The movement profile is a bit different than his slider and changeup. So I'm just curious about that and, why StatCast hasn't updated that, because it doesn't seem like an error when it keeps happening, Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I have to say about his secondary offerings. If you guys want to chime in.
It seems like, especially at the low A level, the StatCast at those stadiums does have, I mean, I think even back to spring training, the StatCast has some trouble re-quantifying pitches. So it usually takes a little bit of normalizing. So that might be why the splitter isn't registering properly or whatever. But what do you think, Blake?
Yeah, I think literally I have no idea what to make of his slider other than when I actually watch it in games. There have been times I've seen it and it looks actually really sharp. And then other times it looks like he doesn't know where it's going and it's kind of like loopy or just kind of like it doesn't have the sharp break that it has. But like to Kareem's point, you look at the pitch on StatCast, I think it's averaging 3 inches of arm side movement, which basically makes it like a changeup or a screwball, and 1,700 RPMs, which would be like the lowest spin rate slider I've ever seen. So either he has like this weird abnormal slider that nobody knows what to do with because they haven't actually been able to hit it very well, or StatCast is just misreading it, and it makes it hard to evaluate other than when you just go off of what you actually see when you watch him.
Well, let me tell you my thing with Chen Wei-Lin. Blake, how do you feel about his fastball in general?
I think his fastball has the potential to be good. It's just not great right now. I think you look at it like it's kind of lively to the arm side, but it just isn't going to miss bats. It sinks. It comes from a higher than average release point. Like he throws it hard, and you like the arm side life to it. But it's just not there. It's almost kind of like Edwin Nunez to me a little bit, where the like raw profile of it, when you look at the velocity and the arm side run and all the other stuff that goes into it, it looks better than it actually plays. And he doesn't really command it particularly well either. It's obviously hit or miss for a guy who's like a 6'8", 20-year-old. But I think there's the chance for it to be a really good pitch if he can reshape it. I just don't feel great about it right now.
Kareem?
To piggy off Blake's point on Chen Wei-Lin, his command on the pitch is not very good at all. Like I know people tend to just look at, walk rate to justify command, but that's just not the case with Chen Wei-Lin. When you look at his fastball heat map, he's literally throwing it down the heart of the plate like all the time. And that's just like, it's working at the lower levels, but I question if that's going to work for him moving forward. And the shape of the pitch isn't great. I do think at that velocity, I still think it's a bit above average, but it's not like a crazy, 70 grade offering or anything you might see from like a MLB pipeline or something, because they're overrating his velocity to like a certain extent.
Yeah, that's my thought too. I think it's a good, if you can use Chen Wei-Lin's fastball to tell you all you need to know about pitchers having success against hitters at low A. The pitch is very pedestrian with flashes of above average, but the heat and just throwing it as a strike allows him to kind of beat up on low A pitchers. And it's always easy for me. I'm always trying to find like the in-organization comparison, just because I think it's easiest for people. And I like the kind of the person I've unfortunately, I guess, glued Chen Wei-Lin to, even though their stuff isn't the same, is Inohan Paniagua. And the only reason is because, Paniagua has a big curveball, and he has a fastball. And I remember at the low levels, he could throw his fastball right down the middle of the plate, and people would just swing through it or not swing at it at all, and it would allow him to set up the curveball and maybe a little off-speed, another additional off-speed offering here and there. But he gets to Peoria at a young age, and he struggles with it. And so I just think Chen Wei-Lin is going to be really fascinating to watch as we see him ascend the organization, because I'm worried about him and the success that he has the potential of having. Just a couple other things before we get into the McGreevy debut. Coach John and Dean Ellis said Pat is literally one of the few good things about today. Thank you very much for saying that. I would agree. What a miserable Cardinal game that was. I think the good thing about us is we're going to be pretty even keel about honest and even keel about what we're seeing. And we're not going to talk about the Cardinal game because it was miserable. So it won't always be Debbie Downer. We'll have some pretty positive things to say here and there. And then I guess before we get to some other things, this is way off of the organization stuff. But Gilly says, what do you guys think of a Bader reunion this offseason to let Scott continue to cook in AAA and not force him into a platoon role to start the year? Again, I think that goes back down to roster construction. I would like them to continue to find center field depth, but I don't think that Harrison Bader, sure, maybe as a platoon with Michael Ciani, maybe you can get the best out of the two of them. I don't think the Cardinals would pump that money, whatever that money is. We saw Kevin Kiermaier still get $10 million to be a defensive first center fielder. So it's not like Bader's going to pay. He's going to cost like $1 million or $2 million or something like that. I think you have to be more financially savvy than that. And I'd like to see them find a financially savvy version of Bader, potentially to pair with Ciani, potentially to give Victor Scott a little bit more time in the offseason. What do you guys think? What do you think, Blake?
I don't know, Kyle. I think in a guy who was on the wrong side of 30 years old who used to play for the Cardinals is right in the Cardinals' wheelhouse when it comes to free agents. But I do think there is something to be said for like a platoon option between the two. I personally would like to see the Cardinals go elsewhere, but I also just as a completely from a fan's perspective, loved watching Harrison Bader when he was here. So like that's absolutely a guy I would enjoy watching. I'm just not sure I would actually make the signing myself.
Kareem?
It's going to depend on how much Harrison Bader costs, like you were saying. If this is someone that's going to be making, $10, $15 million, I don't really think it's, worth it with the current, situation of the Cardinals salary-wise. I think they should. They certainly need some center field depth, but I'd rather them go the direction of finding someone like a Michael Ciani off waivers or like a minor league free agent, something like that. But they definitely need some depth in center field.
Yeah, I think the lesson to take from Ciani, and even some of the players that have come through the organization that didn't last, whether it's Jared Young who's still here or Alfonso Rivas who isn't here. Or is he still here? Who really knows? Even Moises Gomez to a degree, who's no longer here. Buddy Kennedy, like the Cardinals, their scouting staff can identify like stopgap people, for lack of a better term, and maybe they can find somebody on waivers in the next couple months or in the offseason that kind of matches what Michael Ciani was and try to get the most out of them. Especially with position players, they're usually pretty good about maximizing tools that other organizations can't. Russ Steinhorn and the boys down in the minors. I guess they're better with position players and trying to maximize some of those skills, find what works for them. So I that's what I would like. I would like to see them get creative, find somebody else that isn't going to cost them money. We are 28 minutes in. See, guys, this is what I'm talking about. It's not because I'm hammered most of the time on Prospects After Dark. It's just so easy to get waylaid with great questions and also with complex thoughts. But I don't want to get too much further without talking about Michael McGreevy's start. When you look at the line, the traditional line, it was a very, very impressive start. 7 innings pitched. The Cardinals needed that. A relatively abrupt notification to start, all the drama with the trade deadline, et cetera. 7 innings pitched, 3 Ks, a handful of hits. It was impressive. I guess before we get into the negative of that, Kareem, what stood out most on the positive side in his start?
I thought the thing that stood out to me was just his movement profile of his cutter, to be honest. At AAA this year, it profiled like a cutter. It got like 8 inches of induced vertical break and like 2 inches of horizontal. Yeah, 8 inches and something like that. And in his first start, as a big leaguer, it pretty much profiled like a gyro slider, like a bullet slider, where it was close to 0-0 horizontal and vertical. And the pitch played very well. I'm curious to see if that sticks, if the Cardinals, did something that changed his cutter, because that pitch got hammered at AAA. And I think just having another offering, especially against lefties, I'm not too concerned with McGreevy's arsenal against righties, to be honest. I think he's handled his own, just going with his sinker and slider. I think his slider is taking a huge step up this year, especially with the added horizontal break. I think he's done an exceptional job using that against both righties and lefties. But having another pitch like that, if you want to call it a cutter, bullet slider, whatever, that he threw his first big league appearance, I think that could be a very good pitch for him, and much better than that, cutter he was throwing at AAA. The changeup, I think here and there he can use that offering. I don't think it's anything too special, to be honest. But in his debut, he commanded all 5 of his pitches very well, kept the ball on the ground, and McGreevy's done a lot of that at AAA. He'll have some starts where he'll get absolutely shelled, and he does have some struggles against lefties, but yeah, like if he can work this gyro slider, this bullet slider into his arsenal as opposed to the cutter, I think that could help him take the next step up in his development.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the huge thing. And I think when you also look at him too, he was getting like a lot more extension than he typically does too. He's striding a lot further to the plate. And what that means is by doing that, the pitch is looking faster when it comes in, but he's also dropping his release point a bit because he's lower to the ground when he's actually releasing the ball because he's wider apart. And when you look at that, typically induced vertical break is tied to vertical release point. And the lower that goes, the lower the induced vertical break goes. He lowered his release, increased his extension, and kept all of his pitch shapes the same. So basically everything's playing better. It's looking harder to the hitter. And I don't even know where this came from with the bullet slider, the increased extension. He was up in the majors for like 2 days. And then all of a sudden he's changed like 2 major aspects of how he actually pitches.
It's fascinating. It really is. Again, 2 different things completely, but it reminds me of I remember watching Harrison Bader and at the minors, and he was fast, and there was no doubting it. But all of a sudden, he just got faster. It was like somebody on the drive from Memphis to St. Louis. Somebody said, "Hey, look, you have to run as fast as you can all the time. Just run as fast as you can all the time, and good things are going to happen." And it kind of sounds to a degree like part of that is with McGreevy. It was like, look, just extend, get out. Get on, get into your pitches a little bit and make it happen. For me, it was specifically, and this was always McGreevy's calling card, his command of especially the lower corners. I thought, and again, I didn't get to watch the start in person. I was working. I went back and I tried to watch as much of the game as I could. It seemed like, in particular, he was dotting those lower corners really well, which allowed him to drop below the zone and get a lot of swing and miss. The flip side of this is McGreevy is a bit of a hot button topic prospect, right? Because first round draft pick, never really seemed to get to that type of reputation. He never seemed to meet those expectations that come with the first round draft pick. He makes his major league debut. He's had a lot of struggles at AAA. Kareem mentioned that he seems to always do particularly well against righties. Lefties are the issues. What should we, if he were to make a start in the next week, somebody goes on the IL, they can call him up. If you were to make a start in the next week, what are the concerns from that start that we would be keeping an extra eye on? Kareem, what do you think?
I mean, with a pitcher like McGreevy that relies more so on command rather than stuff, there's just more variability in outings just because of that. And if he's not on his A game, commanding those corners like you were talking about, it might be a rough outing. But I still. Entering the season, with the changes McGreevy made to his slider and curveball in particular, I thought that I was higher on him than I was in the past. And to see him have that success at AAA with those pitches, or his slider in particular, that was very encouraging. And yeah, like that's pretty much all I have. Like the command is really going to drive him, and it's you can't always bank on someone having quality command every start, and with that there's going to be a bit more variability.
Yeah, I think Kareem's exactly right. I mean, even as we talk about McGreevy, increasing his extension, throwing a better cutter, whatever it is, his stuff is still not that good. Even with the increased slider, the slider actually looks really solid. Even with the better curveball, his fastballs just aren't that good. I would, again, be concerned about what happens if his command, like what happens if he tries to go down and away and misses over the middle of the plate, or what happens specifically against left-handers, where he's probably going to have to rely on that four-seamer and that cutter a little bit more. Can he show that cutter consistency, and can he actually locate his four-seamer? Because his four-seamer is really not good unless he's really dotting it where he wants it to be. So I still have those concerns against lefties. I still have those concerns about inconsistency. It was just nice to see him make at least one good start at the major league level.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one thing that kind of gets undervalued with McGreevy, and it's something that I've always tried to wager with, is the speed of his arm. He's deceptive in his athleticism and how he throws the baseball. And I think that it almost seems like hitters that haven't seen him are only seeing him for the first time in a game. They have so much trouble picking him up. And it's because of how quick he is, how quick his motions are, how athletic he is in his motions. And I think that'll help him play up quite a bit. I know it seems like the teams at the minor leagues who are extra aggressive will struggle with him as long as he's in command, because they think they can hit everything. It's kind of that John King thing to a degree where, when you get these pitches that you feel like you can hit, you start swinging at, and you just kind of get on top of, you pound into the ground. So I do. You guys nailed it. That's the gist. I think the way you worded it, Kareem, was pretty perfect. It's, if his command isn't on, then he's going to get hammered. And as long as he's commanding, he'll be fine. And to various levels, we saw him strike out, what was it, 12 in a game earlier this year, or 10? I can't, that's not going to happen all that much, but there is a chance of it every once in a while with the right combination of aggressive swinger and his high command, especially if the slider's acting the way the slider can, and the cutter is doing whatever the hell it did last week, because that was amazing and it was fun to watch, and it just had never happened before. So here's to hoping that Michael McGreevy can continue it. But 36 minutes in, the major reason I wanted to get us all together to talk tonight is I wanted to talk about the draft picks before we got too far into the minor league season. When we end up going on podcasts, everybody wants to talk about Weatherholt and Holiday, and then maybe the biggest surprise or the biggest, and I understand that, because that's what your average audience is interested in. But for me, as exciting as JJ Weatherholt is, because he is exciting, he's amazing, he's going to be a major leaguer, he's going to be an impactful major leaguer. From a prospect standpoint, these are the guys I tend to be the most bored with, and not because it's just because we know everything about these guys. Real journalists are doing think pieces on these guys, and you're doing deep dives. And once you get past the second or third round, what you have is a group of people that kind of go unnoticed, and then all of a sudden you're talking about 6th-rounder Tommy Edman, or 6th-rounder Ryan Helsley, or whatever it is, Brendan Donovan. And it's like, oh, there's this whole story to uncover. And I would like to try to get ahead of that a little bit. I would like to inform. I would like to be a part of the information process of the audience, of these new guys in the system that aren't really on the tip of your tongue. We'll get into Weatherholt a little bit. We'll get into Brian Holiday, the 3rd-round pick, a little bit. We'll probably actually start with him. But I really want to get into the day 2 guys and the day 3 guys, because the Cardinals, and we know this, Baseball America has done the study on it, the Cardinals are as good, if not better, than any other organization at making the most of the day 2 and day 3 draft picks, getting the most value out of those picks. So as Cardinal fans, we should be talking about these guys just a little bit more. We'll leave the Weatherholt on the table. If he comes up, he comes up. You can go to any various podcasts that any of the 3 of us have been on. Rambling Redbirds. We're going to be on with C70 on Meet Me at Mutual this weekend, which I'm really excited for. Blake's been on Viva Alberto's. Any of the podcasts you can check. Hard 9 with the Nobles. You can check out all of our thoughts on Weatherholt. But before we get into some of the things, I want to go over tools and athleticism. I think we all had a similar reaction to Brian Holiday, the Cardinals' 3rd-round pick. When it happened, I think we were all like, man, it's fine, but I wish they would have gone for something more. especially in the third round, not having a second round pick. And I know one thing that I've said is, if he would have been taken in the fourth round, I never even would have thought about it. I would have been praising him. It would have been a great pick, but the difference in picks, I guess all of that is just a rambling lead to say, since you've been able to dive in a little bit more, have either of your thoughts on the Brian Holiday selection changed at all in the 3 or 4 weeks since the draft? Blake, I will throw it to you first.
All right. I'm pretty sure Kareem and I are going to give similar answers on this one. But when Holiday was first drafted, I was disappointed because it's very much the Cardinals sticking to what they know, which is the 92-mile-an-hour command control guy in the early rounds. And that's been their bread and butter for years. So not the most excited about the pick initially. But when you look at it, Brian Holiday absolutely has great command. He puts the ball where he wants to. He limits walks, and he's extremely athletic on the mound. So it's not something where you expect that command to regress heavily. And that athleticism on the mound makes me think there might be more velocity inside of him, which would be huge because he is a guy who could absolutely take a jump with even an extra 2 miles per hour on all of his pitches. And the Cardinals have done a good job typically of trying to milk some of that extra velocity out of pitchers. Not saying they'll get it out of Holiday, but there's a chance that they could. And when you look at him, the 92-mile-per-hour thing is what it is, but he's got a pretty lively fastball, at least vertically. It comes at a pretty flat angle into the zone. It's a pitch that can miss bats at the top of the zone, despite the lack of velocity. And I think what really might have gotten the Cardinals attracted to him is the slider. And the pitch missed a ton of bats in college. It got a ton of chases in college. Personally, it's 82 miles per hour, solid two-plane shape, but it's not outstanding, at least from a pure stuff perspective. I think that's a pitch that is not going to play nearly as well in pro ball as it did in college. I wouldn't expect that to be the pitch that really carries him through the minors. Now, if all of a sudden he pulls a Quinn Matthews and now that pitch is going to sit 85, then sure, that absolutely changes the profile of the pitch. It can be a pitch that has a ton of success. And I think when he's coming at it, especially as a lefty with some deception, that's a pitch that can already has an advantage against lefties because lefties show bigger platoon splits. The question is just now, can his changeup play the way he probably needs it to against righties? And it was kind of a fringy-ish pitch in college. So, I look at it, there's the chance that he really adds velocity. He becomes a really solid guy who misses some bats, doesn't walk any hitters. You're looking at a 4-ish starter. I just wanted to see the Cardinals go with a little bit more upside in the third round, but Holiday's not a bad pick overall.
Great.
I wasn't overly high on Holiday when the Cardinals picked him, to be honest. I just thought the way the draft was going, there were a few guys that I would have preferred, especially someone that I talked about a ton, Nate Forcucci. Or Ryan Forcucci, freaking said his name wrong. But yeah, no. But seeing what he went for after the facts, in terms of money, it probably didn't make sense for him to be there. He was out of the price range for the Cardinals. But I mean, another guy like Nate Dome, I think that would have made more sense for a similar amount of money. But yeah, Holiday is definitely someone that has grown on me a bit. He's a special athlete. I think that's what the Cardinals love. I think in recent years, even dating back to before Randy Flores, I think the Cardinals have always valued pitchers that are athletic. And Holiday exemplifies that. He's a very athletic guy, solid extension for, how much, he's a little shorter. And for his height, he gets pretty solid extension. Like Blake said, it's a low release, gets a flat angle on that fastball. Would like to see it a little higher than 92. But I think it'll play fine up in the zone with its flat angle. He gets 18 inches of ride on the pitch. The slider, I played well in college. As Blake was saying, I'm not super optimistic on it playing as well as it did in college just because it's, 82, 83 miles an hour. And it's not fast enough for pro ball with his current pitch specs. Now, I personally, I would like to see him, change that pitch into more of a bullet gyro slider, add a little bit more velo. I think that suits his profile a little bit more. And, his changeup and curveball are also decent, solid pitches. I think this is a guy that's got 4, solid-ish pitches. The pitchability is there. It's very impressive that, he only walked 19 batters all season in 113 innings. That's special. That might be the best control in the draft. Now, I'm not sure what that looks like in pro ball, how the command, necessarily looks like. If it's more so him just throwing pitches, near the heart of the plate, I don't have the, all the data on Holiday to, confidently say this is a guy that's got very good command, but it's nice to see him just limit walks, and it'll be something to, watch in his development. But yeah, like I love that he's an athletic guy. I think this is someone that the Cardinals definitely saw something in, and I think the scouting team just, he fits the mold of a pitcher the Cardinals can really, develop and, potentially add velo. We saw that with Quinn Matthews this season. I think, if Holiday is sitting like 94 miles an hour on his fastball, has like an 86 mile an hour bullet slider, and is still commanding his pitches like fairly well, I think this could be a solid prospect. And yeah, like my stance on him definitely changed. I still think it was a bit of a reach at that pick and for the money he went for, but still, like, I'm a fan. I'm more of a fan of the pick than I was when it happened.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's interesting because late in the year he was hitting 95, and because he has a hand, like almost 5 solid offerings of various degrees, it seems like a very Quinn Matthews-esque pick. I know I've heard Quinn Matthews on interviews talk about crediting the Cardinals' strength and conditioning coaches with putting them on a program this offseason or this past offseason to help get to some of that velocity. And my guess is that the Cardinals will do something very similar with Brian Holiday in an attempt to get to that, 95 that he showed against Florida when he kind of dominated Florida, down the stretch there in college. And I think that I think that's what they're banking on more than anything. For me, again, we all feel the same way, but it's when you see him and it's like, all right, they did this thing again where they kind of went with an athletic kid who kind of doesn't throw up, who doesn't walk anybody, who can get strikeouts at the collegiate level, but it's all just like varying levels of average. It does get frustrating in that moment. But again, once you kind of allow yourself to dream on it and see it and maybe understand the template that they put forward with other prospects, like, it starts to make a little bit more sense. But to me, you guys really nailed the slider of it all. I cannot wait to see how that slider plays. I can't wait to see what's next in the evolution of that pitch in particular, because it's going to need to evolve in order to have success at the minor league level. Otherwise, he's going to get to Double-A, and it doesn't matter if he's throwing 95 or not. He doesn't have a changeup like Quinn Matthews has. He doesn't necessarily have a wipeout breaking pitch against same-handed hitters. So I'm anxious to see how he evolves. If he can continue to look like and take the strides against Florida that he made against Florida down the stretch, if that translates to the minors. But only time will tell. I wouldn't suspect that we will see him this year. So yeah, but anyways, that's it. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about Brian Holiday, not a whole lot of time about JJ Weatherholt, and just get into some of the prospects, some of the draft picks from day 2 and day 3 that really stuck out to us. For me, I'm going to go first. And just because we kind of already talked about him, I find myself, not only because he's had success, I mean, we're going to try to make a point for the audience to talk about these guys as if they have not made their major league debut. We'll get into that, or their minor league debut. We're going to try to talk about them as if they haven't made their minor league debut yet. We'll get into some of the positives of the minor league debut after we go over some of the tools, some of the things about these guys that excite us. But it's hard to say that and then be a total hypocrite when I mention Ian Petritz, the outfielder out of Alabama, the somewhat blocky corner outfielder who isn't particularly athletic, but who can hit the ball. Again, to draft somebody like this with a hit skill in the 12th round, you just never know where it's going to go from that. He's one of the guys that really stands out to me because he's had success in a tough conference. He's been through a lot. He's kind of a gamer. He's kind of a team leader. And, again, in the 12th round, sure, you want to see maybe a little bit more athleticism, but for real, like in your first 10 rounds, the athleticism is probably all gone, and you have to get kind of creative in day 3. So Petritz is one of those guys that kind of sticks out to me. As I mentioned earlier in the chat, in our group chat, the first thing I said is he's so annoying. Like, he's just one of those guys when you watch you could understand how every other team would hate him because of how annoying he is. He has some big Nick Dunn energy. And so if you're looking for your Nick Dunn, then I would point you towards Ian Petrix. My plan was to kind of go over tool by tool, but how about we do this? Who on day 3, pick one guy at first, and then your second guy and third guy and fourth guy as you start talking, like I like to do. Pick one guy from day 3 that isn't getting enough publicity, that really like got your motor revved up on draft day. Kareem, who's your guy or guys or group of people?
My guy's got to be 16th round pick Daniel Ortiz.
Yes.
Now, a lot of these prospects the Cardinals selected, I'm going to be honest, like I didn't know a ton about most of these guys, but Ortiz was someone that I just followed along, just watching the MLB Draft League. And with him being one of the younger players there and performing as, one of the top bats, and it wasn't just his, average or OPS, his regular stats. Like when you look at the nitty gritty, his exit velocity is 90th percentile. Yeah, he's hitting the sweet spot all the time. It fascinated me that he was available in the 16th round. Like this is someone that's still 19 years old. Past couple of years, he was at the Appalachian League last year for summer ball, which is also a wood bat league. And he performed very well there as well. So back-to-back summers playing in woodback leagues playing against players that are much older than him and having a ton of success. Like that's something that really, impressed me just when looking at his profile. I will say like his defense isn't great. Like he has a lot of problems with his glove work and just like his hand-eye coordination when it comes to defense. Like I saw him make a lot of errors just due to his glove work. And that's something he's going to need to get better at if he wants to stick at third base. But besides that, I really like the offensive profile. He hits the sweet spot a ton. Exit velocities are great. And yeah, to get a guy 19 years old with this kind of promise in the 16th round, I thought that was a hell of a pick.
Yeah, I completely agree with Kareem. I'll go with John Gazdar and be lame and then choose the first guy chosen in day 3 because somebody had to.
Lame.
I know. Let me hear it. But Gazdar has elite contact rates to the point where he hit like 405 in his final college season, struck out like 5% of the time, which is crazy numbers. I know he was playing in a small school conference. Like, I get that. We still have to see how the numbers translate, but the guy makes a ton of contact, and he also does a really, really good job of finding the sweet spot, which means he's going to hit a lot of line drives at the major league level if that hit tool translates the way that we want it to. And, he didn't have the greatest of success in some of the wood bat leagues, and that's mostly because he doesn't hit for a lot of power, and he really kind of lacks some of that impact potential, but he still didn't strike out very often. He hit for a good average. We'll get on base at a decent clip, mostly driven by the average because he does have a chase-heavy approach a little bit because kind of has a little Cesar Prieto in him where he can hit anything, so he swings at everything. But for a guy who can also potentially stick up the middle, he played shortstop in college, probably not going to stick there. He'll probably move to second base as a pro, but I would expect to see him be able to at least play some short and to be able to play second, short, and third. 3 infield positions with a really good hit tool in the 11th round sounds like a great pick to me.
I agree. Not to let everyone in on some of the things we say behind the scenes, but I think we all kind of had a similar thought where, hey, some of these day 3 guys might actually be better currently with a better future than some of the day 2 guys, which I think speaks pretty loudly to some of the successes and some of the skills of the amateur scouting group, because like, I mean, you guys, you bring up both Gazdar and Daniel Ortiz. Like, you really have to do some work to get there. Not everybody's watching or tuned into the draft league. Now, of course, all the executives, all the scouts are affiliated with organizations, but it's good work to do their homework to get these type of athletes, these types of guys in day 3. I think back to, the last couple of years, some of these day 3 guys, sure, maybe they don't pan out, but they're kind of exciting. Andre Granillo, who's at AAA right now, is a day 3 guy. There's guys out there that have made impact, even if it hasn't been higher than, even high A with like Osvaldo Tovalin. There are guys worth following here, and I love the 2 guys that you picked. What about for day 2? Now, again, we're not going to include Brian Holiday. And also, I'm going to take away the guy that we would all select, which is Andrew Dukanich, I believe is how you pronounce it. Am I close? Does anyone know? Is the Dukanich family in here? Will someone speak up? But we're not going to use him either. What I will say is, I think we would all agree, and we've all talked about it, that the seventh round pick from Vanderbilt, Andrew Dukanich, is probably their best draft pick. He's hurt. He's working his way back from Tommy John surgery. But who on day 2 do you think, Blake, might have been their best day 2 pick that did not include Brian Holiday?
All right, so I'm going to steal a guy that Kareem was probably going to mention because he's tweeted about him extensively since he was drafted. But Cade McGee is a pick that I absolutely loved. He's a guy who doesn't have the best top end power, but it doesn't really matter because he just pulls everything in the air. So as long as he hits the ball moderately hard, it's like a double down the line or going over the fence, and it allows him to have a lot more in-game power than you would expect from a guy with the kind of raw power that he possesses. But then also he plays a really, really solid third base overall. And when you look at that, for a 9th round pick, a guy who can be legitimately above average at a corner infield spot and also hit for power with a solid hit tool, that's a really, really nice blend of tools from somebody going so late in the draft.
What do you think, Kareem?
Yeah, I don't know if this was my favorite day 2 pick, but this is someone that just fascinates me, and that's 4th round pick Ryan Campos. This is a guy that just hits a ton of ground balls. But the thing about him is he sprays the ball everywhere. He's going to hit a ton of opposite field ground balls. And he hit 350 each of his 3 seasons at Arizona State, and he walked more than he struck out. So it's a very interesting profile, not a ton of power, although the exit velocities aren't, that bad. It's just he hits the ball on the ground a lot of low line drives, stuff like that. So I'm not sure how the power is going to translate. And so far at Palm Beach, I'm pretty sure his ground ball rate's near 100%. So we'll see how that translates. But I'm just fascinated by his profile and the fact that, this is a guy that's, hit 350 each of his 3 seasons at Arizona State. Not a ton of power, like I said, but sprays the ball everywhere. And I just think he's going to be a pesky hitter. And it'll be interesting to see how teams, especially with the new defensive shift rules, how teams play him defensively. And I don't know. I'm just fascinated by Campos and curious to see if the ground balls, if he can still have success with his heavy ground ball approach in the minor leagues.
Yeah, he's a team leader too, right? He's one of those catchers. I mean, everybody that you see or hear or talk about him, they love him through and through. You understand why, even though he's kind of a ground ball machine, why the Cardinals or a team might highlight him in the 4th round. I also think, to your point, Kareem, he's the kind of guy who this organization can get the most of. And it might not happen right away. You wouldn't expect it to happen in 3 weeks. But I do think that they can get him on a line. I feel like he's the exact kind of guy that they've had a lot of success kind of getting on a line, turning a ground ball swing into a line. Jordan Walker's a whole different beast because of his height and his size and his body and his build and his swing and everything. But I think I'm extra interested in Campos because of those things. I think for me, I don't think for me, Cade McGee is their best day 2 pick that isn't Dukanich or Holiday, but that's whatever. The guy that I'm most interested in, I guess, is Jack Finley out of Notre Dame, the lefty, as he works his way back from injury. They love him. People love him, and he's kind of the same with Dukanich, whose name I continue to butcher, I'm sure. And that he does have kind of some clout to follow his name. And he's had good starts against talented rosters in the minors. And he has some interesting pitch profile. But it's just a matter of can he get healthy? What does it look like when he's healthy? And the thing that I like about him is in the past, the Cardinals have, this guy, they might doing it back-to-back. Drafting Finley and Dukanich right back-to-back is really interesting for me. I kind of love that they're taking the shots in those rounds. But when we were talking about Braden Davis, I mentioned that the Cardinals just drafted a healthy version of Stephen Gindry, a big fastball that's kind of weird, a changeup that's really devastating, and then probably not a whole lot else. And they used to kind of do this stuff in the third round and fourth round, not frequently, but every once in a while. I like the fact that they are doing it a little bit later and that they're doing it with interesting arms, with interesting stuff. So he would be mine if I was choosing somebody different and I couldn't use the people that I stopped us from being able to use. That's how good of a host I am. Real fast, our good friend Jake Wood from Ramblin' Redbirds podcast says, how many stores did you loot when they didn't have a chance for in May? I personally cleared out an entire Payless. Yeah, when we were on Rambling Redbirds, it was funny. If you haven't listened to it, definitely listen to it. It's terrific. But we all had different people that we had highlighted, but we all highlighted Aiden May. And then when he got drafted, and he got drafted with like 3 in a row of the guys that I had highlighted, I felt personally attacked by the other 3 organizations. But yeah, it was heartbreaking. What did you guys think? Did you think that there was an off chance at that point that May would make his way to the Cardinals, Blake?
Yeah, I thought there was a chance, and I was kind of hoping there was a chance. And when I look at like Aiden May compared to the pitchers the Cardinals took on day 2 before Dukanich, it's kind of disappointing that he didn't slide there and actually make it down to the Cardinals pick. But it's just kind of how the draft falls. I think I didn't see what his signing bonus was, but I don't imagine he would have taken the underslot deal that Brian Holiday took. Yeah. So if the Cardinals wanted to go with that draft strategy, then he probably wouldn't have fit anyways.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have been any worse than if he had been there and they wouldn't have taken him. What do you think, Kareem?
I asked around everyone that is a little bit more tapped in than me in terms of the draft, and they told me Aiden May probably wouldn't be available. So I kind of lost hope then. But yeah, like it would have been a miracle if he somehow landed and the Cardinals picked him. That'd have been cool.
Yeah, it would have been a miracle, and I'm glad you don't have hope. Let's take away as much hope as we possibly can. We're better off if we don't have hope. I've learned in my life. Now, I guess the next thing I kind of want to do, and it's so pedestrian, and I apologize for being kind of weak, but initially I was going to go like tool by tool, like who has the best contact tool, who has the best power tool, who's the best defender, and then kind of go down pitch types. But I think what I'm going to do it a little differently. We'll start with the day 2 guys, and we'll include Dukanich, and we'll also include Holiday. Who has of the pitchers, in your opinion, who has the biggest tool, whether it be command, whether it be a certain pitch, whether it be command of a certain pitch? Who is the one guy that kind of sticks out to you? For me, just to get ahead of it, and because I think just going basic and easy, I think Brian Holiday's command of his fastball in all quadrants is very impressive. I don't know if it's the best. You guys actually have the hard data. You'll be able to make it a little bit more clear than I can. But as I stall to give you guys a little bit more time to think, like Brian Holiday's command of his fastball in particular, and command of his arsenal, it might be one of the quote unquote like louder tools from day 2. What do you think, Blake?
I think there's. Are we talking like all players, or are we looking at pitchers specifically?
Let's just stick with pitchers. We'll get to the hitters next.
All right. So I think there's a couple relievers on day 3 that you can make this case for, but I think
day 2, Blake. We're gonna get to day 3. Don't you do this to me,
no,
Blake?
I will take a off trail. I think Andrew Dukanich probably has the best overall stuff. And simply at just like the pitch metrics that we've looked at, very small sample size, might have the best curveball that the Cardinals took. We're looking at a guy who routinely is like 80-81 on the curveball with just a crazy amount of depth. It's like negative 18 to negative 20 inches of induced vertical break. Like that's a crazy amount of depth for a pitch that's thrown that hard. And it's also a pitcher who has a like 94 mile per hour fastball with good riding life to it. Like I think of all the pitchers the Cardinals took, we've already touched on this. He's probably the best pitcher the Cardinals took. But I think in terms of stuff, he's also probably the best as well.
Kareem, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Blake touched on like a couple of the relievers. I'm going to go with Louisiana Tech righty Sam Broderson and his fastball in particular.
Oh, God. Day two, we're sticking with day two, Kareem. We'll get to day three. You both broke my heart. We were in this together, and here
About day two. This is you can't restrict us like this.
I know, right? Oh, this is so stupid. I'm so bad at this. Hold on a second, real fast. We have Daniel Shoptaw down here. Our Lord and Savior Daniel Shoptaw says, "Look at Kyle keeping order instead of inciting chaos." Yeah, you know what? I take it back. Do day three. We'll do. I don't want day two. Don't give me your day two nonsense. No, give me your day three. No. On day two in particular, Blake was going to start talking about him, and then I interrupted Blake, but Blake wasn't even going to talk about him. He was just going to use it as his lead-in for day two. Before we get to the day three pitchers, Kareem, who on day two maybe has like the biggest tool on the pitching side, in your opinion? If you need a second to look, I'll say another one that comes to my mind. And
I would go with Dukanich, but
yeah. No, you can do that. That's fine. I think in this particular exercise, as we work through it out on the fly, is that I think the fact that we all kind of feel like it's Dukanich. You know, I just kind of through holidays, but we all kind of feel like it's Dukanich. Just helps emphasize that it was such a great pick. You know, give us your thoughts on Dukanich.
You know what? I changed my selection. All right?
Yes!
Blake, listen. Blake talked about Dukanich. I'll talk about someone else. All right. So Braden Davis, all right, lefty.
Screw it, we'll do it live. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, his changeup is really interesting. Yeah. Like the movement profile is like pretty much exactly like his fastball. But, you know, with that, like hitters kind of just it's tough to pick up, and hitters just like whiff a ton against it. The chase rates are really high. So, I mean, I think it's fascinating. It'll be interesting to see how that pitch works in pro ball. Like I wonder if it'll have the same success. But yeah, I mean, his changeup, at least results wise, in college this year, it was up there for one of the top pitches the Cardinals selected this year.
I agree. It was funny. That's what I was just about ready to say. He was the changeup of his when I was going to try to give some time to stall. Now, I was going to go to hitters in the second round, but I'll be honest, I'm terrified now. I feel like we have to go with I know, Kareem, don't feel bad about it. I love it. I love that you're excited about it. Honestly, like I think this is part of why I wanted to do it. I wanted to be able to bring you two guys together and to talk it over with you. Is I think there's a certain amount of excitement that the three of us have that just gets us fired up. And my hope is that people will take that as well, because I think it's important. But so don't get down. Look, Kareem, you've heard me on podcasts. I do nothing but the dumbest shit over and over and over again. I make a fool of myself so that when I actually make a fool of myself, it's easier for people to understand how I've made a fool of myself. You're so good at this. Honestly, you're so talented, so good at it. Don't let it bring you down, because here in a second, you're about ready to school us on a day 3 relief pitcher. And I cannot wait to hear about your biggest tooled up relief pitcher from day 3. Give it to us, Kareem.
Yeah, so Sam Broderson, Louisiana Tech, he's got a fastball that sits 93 up to 97. And the thing about it, he gets a ton of riding life on it. It averages pretty much 20 inches of induced vertical break, and he throws from a 6-foot vertical release. The pitch also has 4.2 inches of horizontal, so it's got that cut ride kind of shape. And the pitch had a 35% whiff rate this year, which is like absurdly high for a fastball. So yeah, like I think in terms of fastballs the Cardinals selected, like even including Dukanich, I think Broderson has the best fastball that the Cardinals drafted this year. And besides the fastball, like he's also got an 85 mile an hour gyro slider. The pitch played very well, and he threw 3 pitches. He threw a splitter like 3 times, and it had like 1,300 RPM. So I'd be curious to see if he, starts throwing that more in pro ball and what that looks like. So yeah, I think, the tools are there for him to be an effective reliever. And like, I'm curious to see what he's going to do under big league or the Cardinals development now. It's going to be a huge step up from Louisiana Tech, I'm sure. And yeah, that's really what I have about Broderson. The command is a little hit or miss, I will say. Like the strikeout stuff's there, but he still had a ton of success. Like the batted ball data wasn't that bad. So I think this is someone that even with high walk rates, he might have some success. But yeah, like his stuff's very exciting, and yeah, it should be fun to follow him.
It's even more exciting with the heaters, right? Because we've all been pretty critical of some of the Cardinals draft picks because they don't really have a fastball that gives you excited, like makes you excited, that gives you something to kind of dream on. Like one of my favorite relievers is Andrew Marrero because of how filthy that slider is, but he just doesn't have a fastball that matters. In his command of its trash too. So with Broderson, it's even more exciting. Broderson rather, it's even more exciting to have a fastball that profiles interesting and something, and off-speed pitches to get excited about and to build on, especially that deep in the draft. What about you, Blake? Who's your day 3 arm?
Well, I don't know if I want to claim him as my day 3 arm.
Ah.
But in terms of a day 3 arm who has just electric stuff, weirdly enough, it's 20th rounder Owen Rice, who gets almost like 22 inches of induced vertical break on his fastball. And this comes with the caveat that he was downright terrible at a small school in college and walked like 43 batters in 33 innings. So absolutely zero command. The Cardinals just threw a dart at some really good stuff, and they're just going to see if it sticks. But it's the 20th round. Why not? So I'm a fan of that pick. It might literally crash and burn because the guy can't throw a strike. But if you're going to take a chance on somebody in the 20th round and almost nobody makes the majors, you might as well take a chance on the guy with electric stuff. And then I'll also cheat and throw in one more name, Nolan Sparks, who I knew nothing about until he actually pitched for Palm Beach, and we got a little bit of data on him. Mostly a sinker guy, it looks like. He has a 4-seam fastball, 17.3 inches of induced vertical break from a 5.3 release. That's a low release with a lot of riding life. That's a fastball that can miss bats. He's got a nice hard curveball to him, literally almost just like straight down. There's not a ton of like glove side movement to it. So I think he's actually a really interesting kind of a smaller school 4-year guy who flew a little bit under the radar, but could end up popping up a little bit as he pitches more in the system.
Yeah, am I wrong? It wasn't Nolan Sparks. So after the Cardinals drafted him, like almost immediately on Twitter, there was video of him at one of the labs. I can't remember if it was Driveline or Treads or whatever. Treads. All right, yeah, Tread. Where within 6 months of working with them, his entire not his entire arsenal, but he got bumped a huge pitch profile bump with all of his stuff, specifically his fastball. That was him, right?
Yeah, that was him.
Yeah, he's super interesting. He would have been my choice had I been ready to give a choice, but I think God, I can't wait to see. I'm so excited about all these guys. Blake, did you have something else to say? I'm sorry, I felt like I
No, absolutely not. I'm sorry I stole your pick of Nolan Sparks.
I'm glad that you did, because now I don't have to say anything. I'll take it. These people couldn't be happier either. Okay, so then I guess we'll double back around to maybe the day 2. And again, if it ends up being the same guy, it ends up being the same guy. It's not like you've got like 13 people or 20 people to choose from. It's less than a handful of guys. But what is a big tool specifically from one of the hitting prospects from day 2 that really sticks out? Again, maybe it's just a contact tool, maybe it's the power tool, maybe it's speed, maybe it's defense. Blake, who's your guy?
So I'll choose one that's a little more under the radar this time. I think in terms of plate discipline, like Bryce Madrone from Oklahoma really, really stands out. The guy absolutely never chases outside the zone. And typically when you see that, it's a guy like Lars Nootbaar who just never swings the bat, period. But Madrone's actually like moderately aggressive on pitches inside of the zone, and he's still patient enough to lay off pitches when they leave the zone. That's a sign of just a really good eye at the plate and a really good approach. There's not a whole lot else in the pro. Like he's very much a plate approach kind of guy. There's not a ton of power. The contact is a little bit fringy in terms of in-zone contact, but when you simply look at his swing decisions, he makes amazing swing decisions, and that can go a long way for a prospect, and I really do see why the Cardinals valued him in the 10th round.
Yeah. Kareem, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I'll go with a guy we haven't touched on yet, and that's 6th round pick, Josh Cross. Yeah, so Cross, he was a catcher for Cincinnati. I'm sure he's going to be playing first base moving forward. But, you got to love the bat. This is a guy that's got a ton of raw power. We've already seen him hit balls 100-plus miles an hour from both sides of the plate. Like, the raw power is there, and it's going to be there with wood bats, which is very encouraging. I think there's more hitability and contact than, people would expect with that profile. Although I will say, he does a much better job at making contact from his left side than his right side. So I don't think he's going to ditch switch hitting, but it'll be interesting to see if he can, develop his right side of the plate in that sense. But yeah, ton of raw power. He had 106.5 mile an hour, 90th percentile exit velocity, which is crazy. 29% barrel rate. He's consistently hitting the barrel, hits a ton of home runs. And yeah, I love this guy's stance at the plate too. He's very fun to watch just in the box. And yeah, I think the bat should carry in a first base profile. And in terms of the Cardinals draft, I think he has the best power.
Me too. I think, that probably would have been my direction too. I just think once you get him on first base, I think you'll start to see him really, first base consistently. And I doubt that they'll do it. I think that they're going to try to, harbor as many catchers as possible for as long as possible as part of their course correcting for Yadier Molina still. I think that we're going to see them commit to catchers as long as they possibly can. But I think that once you see him commit to first base, I think maybe what we were all hoping out of William Sullivan, I think he'd be the guy that we start to see that out of. I think he's got some big power in there that he can tap into consistently with the right teaching. I also think the approach swing combo with him, again, Cardinals do a really good job. The coaching staff, the minor league instructors, minor league hitting coaches, and their communication with the scouts, I think they do a particularly good job of finding guys that they can get the most out of. Ryan Holgate and maybe some of the teenage second round picks withstanding, of course. But I like him. I do think that maybe the best quote unquote tool here might actually be Ryan Campos and his ability to make contact and kind of command the strike zone. That's probably the direction I would go in. Before we go to the day 3 hitters, our good friend Jake Wood again asked, Blake or Kareem, can you guys explain IVB a little bit more? What's considered average? So I too can get excited when you say a number. Whoever wants to get into that can get into that. I don't want to choose one of you because I love both of you.
All right, I can start. Kareem, if you want to add anything, feel free to jump in. But basically, induced vertical break is the amount that a pitch moves relative to gravity, at least vertically. So when you're looking at a positive number, it's rising relative to what it would be expected versus gravity. But the average, I think, this year in terms of a 4-seam fastball is 15 to 15.7, something like that. 15.7 inches of induced vertical break at about a 5.8 foot release height. And now it's important to mention the release height because induced vertical break is generally tied to release height and velocity. So as velocity goes up, IVB generally slightly goes down. As release height goes up, IVB goes up. As release height goes down, IVB goes down. So you typically want to keep it in context of the other variables. So, I mean, if you want to be excited about a number, you do want to generally look at the release height, but 18 plus, probably a good range to be pretty excited about, unless the guys come from a crazy high, 6'3" release height.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. Blake absolutely nailed it. So yeah, around 18 inches is just standard. That's pretty good. 18. But I will add, Blake was talking about, it's all respective to release height. So if a pitcher's throwing from a super high release, I know this year in particular, someone that was really just I feel a lot of people were overrating their vertical break was someone like a Trey Savage. God, it's on my tip of my tongue. But yeah, Trey Savage. He gets 22 inches of vert, but it's from a super high release, and the pitch didn't play as well as you would expect just because of that. And a lot of people just focus on vertical break nowadays without taking a look at other factors like a release height or something like that. So I will say generally around 18 and higher is pretty good, but it really depends on release height.
Yeah, and to Kareem's point, just to add on, this isn't related to IVB, but as we talk about a high release height means your IVB generally plays down a little bit. It's not necessarily bad to have a high release height. That generally leads to steeper angle breaking balls down at the bottom of the zone, which tend to play really well. And I know Kareem and I have talked about this in the past, but we actually think that was the best part of Trey Savage's game, was all of his secondary offerings come from a really steep angle down in the zone, missed a ton of bats when they were thrown at the knees. Whereas a lot of people focus on the fastball. It's really the change up and the breaking balls that really pushed him over the top for us.
Awesome. That was fantastic, guys. Thank you for that. Boy, I want to talk more about that, though. No, okay. So, well, how about this? Before we get too far, Kareem, I think one thing that you do a pretty good job. One thing that you guys both do everything amazing. But I think one thing that you use to differentiate yourself, and you also said a minute ago to highlight, was you do a really good job of pointing out what someone's release height is, and how the IVB as compared to release angle or release height. One of the guys that you've helped to foster a following of is Darlin Saladin. Kind of use what you guys just said, what you just, I guess, defined. Use that and kind of use Darlin as the example for what you just said, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so pitches with a flat vertical approach angle at the top of the strike zone perform really well. And I think that's something that Saladin does very well. It's not only the fact that he's getting solid ride from a low slot, but a big part of that is just the fact that he commands the pitch up in the zone. Like the flat vertical approach angle fastball is a pitch that has more success at the top of the strike zone rather than lower in the strike zone. So it's very important to command that pitch at the top of the zone to get the results you want with it. And I think that's something that Saladin does very well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll get back into, because we're already an hour and 20 minutes into this. Again, this is, I think you guys have been awesome. This has been fantastic. Day 3, just maybe some of the louder tools, or a tool in particular of the hitters that were drafted and signed, that sticks out with you. And if you decide you want to double up on the guy that you mentioned earlier, as I think about Daniel Ortiz, feel free. What do you think, Blake? What is a tool in particular that stuck out with our Day 3 people? And even if you want to use John Gazdar, because
that's what I'm going with for sure. Just because Gazdar was one of my favorite picks of this draft, probably like top 3 or 4, probably top 3 outside of Weatherholt, honestly, for me. In this draft. And again, like, to reiterate the points I said earlier, he struck out less than 5% of the time last year and hit 405 in college. Like, those are crazy numbers. And that kind of a hit tool is absolutely something that can be a carrying tool for a guy. As long as he can play like a solid enough defense in the infield, and maybe, hit some doubles. Like, and that's the thing too. He also hits a ton of line drives. Like, a lot of times a hit tool isn't just the ability to make contact. It's the ability to make flush contact and to actually hit the ball at good angles and not just beat it into the ground like Campos does a lot. And I think that's really what differentiates Gazdar. And it makes me think he's going to be at like a line drive spray hitter, lots of doubles guy. Maybe gets to a little bit of over the fence power, but that kind of hit tool really, really is impressive for a guy who's an 11th rounder.
Give it to us, Kareem.
Yeah, so I'm going with another hit tool. I think that was a theme in this year's draft class. The Cardinals targeted a ton of guys that, have an advanced, ability to make contact. And I'm going with 12th round pick Ian Petrutz. Now, we talked about Petrutz a bit earlier, but yeah, this is just a very gritty ball player, left-hand hitter. He drew more walks than strikeouts each of his 3 seasons in college baseball. So, this is a guy that's just got a good approach, makes a ton of contact, had an 85% contact rate, which is elite. And not only is he making contact inside the strike zone, when he decides to chase, he does a pretty good job at, getting the barrel on the ball and, hitting it where the fielders aren't. I posted his first hit in pro ball, and it was a changeup that was far outside of the strike zone that he had no business making contact with, and he just drove it for a line drive single. So, yeah, I'm just fascinated by Petrutz. He's gotten off to a tremendous start so far in pro ball. And, yeah, I'm fascinated to see what his development looks like. This is someone that has more raw power than some of the other guys that the Cardinals took in Day 3, which it'll be interesting to see if, he taps into that more. I do think he's more of a line drive kind of hitter. So I don't know if he'll necessarily ever tap into that power to, the full extent. But yeah, very impressed by his bat to ball skills and approach at the plate. And yeah, but Petrutz is my guy.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you bring up the theme, because it seems like every year they kind of have a theme, right? And sometimes the theme of the draft kind of goes from year to year, and it'll carry over from year to year. I think one of the things that people highlighted was the height of players. It's anecdotal, it's something to joke around about, and it is something that happened. Aside from that weird little anecdote, was there any other? And I guess since we've already brought it up, the bat to ball skills, but were there any other themes that you saw in this particular draft, exclusive to this draft, or that carried over from other drafts? And if there wasn't, God bless you both. I really don't know, but like I know one thing for me is I feel like, and it was something that we talked about with the Hard Nine. They had mentioned that the Cardinals draft pitchers that don't have any SEC connections. Now, Dukanich does, of course. He went to Vanderbilt. Very, very minor because of injuries. But I do think one thing that they do quite frequently is they find pitchers that have had success against top SEC talent. Like Brian Holiday, again, that game against Florida was big. I know with Mount, there was a big start against Vanderbilt that year. Hansen had big starts against the SEC. I think that is a kind of a low-key trend that goes from year to year. As again, try to give you guys a little more time. Are there any trends at all that you thought stuck out from this draft or came from other drafts? And if there aren't, don't feel like you have to reach for anything. I'm just curious if anything stuck out.
Yeah, actually, kind of related to your thing about players' heights and it being anecdotal, I do think the Cardinals actually made an intentional effort to draft pitchers who throw a flat angled fastball, meaning like that kind of that lower VAA fastball that really plays at the top of the zone where it can miss bats. And as you think about it, like vertical release height is a big component of that. And your vertical release height is likely going to be lower if you're 5'10 as opposed to 6'6. So the Cardinals drafted guys, I think their first two pitchers were 5'11 and 5'11. And then they got somebody else who was like 5'10 and 5'8. And then they took somebody who was 6'3 who also throws from a low slot. So I think that was something of a theme for the Cardinals draft this year is even though they might not have drafted guys with the most explosive stuff early in the draft, they did draft a lot of guys who have those flat angled fastballs that you can expect to play moderately well up at the top of the zone.
Kareem, does that track or is there anything else that stuck out to you?
I don't have anything off the top of my head, but just to go back off of like the talk on bat to ball skills, I also think approach is something that they look at a lot, and that's just not this year. I think the Cardinals organization, the scouting department, has always valued guys that not only avoid chasing pitches outside of the strike zone, but are decently aggressive inside the strike zone. And I think this draft we saw that. Obviously with the first pick in Weatherholt, but then when you go down, guys like Bryce Madrone, like he's another guy that just doesn't chase outside of the strike zone while swinging inside the strike zone at a solid rate. So yeah, like approach is definitely something that I've noticed over the years.
That's funny, because another thing that people would say, and something that we both, or all three of us kind of touched on earlier in this podcast, and we've all touched on other places, is how the Cardinals, they kind of demand command with their early pitchers. So you can kind of see a theme, right? It's like, all right, pitchers who command the ball and hitters that command the zone, and you kind of adjust it from there. So I think those are all really good points. I guess before we finish, I was going to try to get into some of the debuts, but if we do this again, which is something that I think we all would like to do, if we have the time and can make it happen, whether it be in a week or 2 weeks, we'll get into the draft picks debuts then. I guess on a very broad way, is there anything else about the draft picks that either of you would like to tell an audience or that would stick out to you, whether it be, again, anecdotal or funny or serious, or like this is important for them to know because it's something that you find important? Kareem, is there anything that sticks out to you? Any other like last parting words about the draft picks that you want to throw out there? I guess, how about this? As you think about that, what would you grade the Cardinals draft without a second round pick? You have to keep that in. Now, keep in mind that this comes with the caveat too. And I guess part of the reason I'm rambling now is I think that there's a couple things about the draft that I think Cardinal fans need to keep in mind now too, is your farm system really does take a hit when you don't have a second round pick. We're learning that more and more as the Cardinals forfeit their second round pick to draft players or to sign players to supplement the major league club. And then the other thing I think that we're learning is to not get supplemental picks really hurts what the Cardinals have done all these years, because now that, I guess because of the last collective bargaining agreement, the Cardinals don't get a supplemental draft pick as part of collective or a competitive balance. And that's one less pick you're getting, one less draft slot. And I think it makes it even harder to quote unquote like grade, how a draft is. But of course, maybe as I ramble, the thing that I would change my question to just say, like, do you feel good about this draft? And if you did, what makes you feel good about it? And if you didn't, what are some of your trepidations, Kareem?
Yeah, I think overall they did a pretty good job. Wasn't overly high on the early day 2 picks. Like the draft kind of felt like a roller coaster in that sense. Like you had the super high, first round pick with a guy like JJ Weatherholt. You get to day 2, and then here are a few picks that, you're kind of scratching your head. But I mean, I've gone around with these guys like Holiday, Campos, even Braden Davis, but to a lesser extent, I would say. And I think they absolutely killed it on day 3. I think if there are, some parting words for me, like it's just Cardinals fans should, keep an eye on some of these day 3 guys, whether it's someone like I talked about Daniel Ortiz in the 16th round, 19-year-old that has a ton of success in wood bat leagues. Nolan Sparks, it'll be interesting to follow his development, whether the Cardinals, develop him as a starter or a reliever. I know he's pitching out of relief right now, but I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Like, this is a college pitcher. So like, I think there could be just some like conserving with him, and you just never know, but he does seem like more of a reliever. I don't want to get on a tangent, but it'll be interesting to see if Sparks has developed into a starter, because he has some fun stuff. But yeah, like parting words, I think Cardinals fans should pay attention to what they did on day 3 and really, keep up with some of these guys they selected.
Yeah, I agree completely with Kareem. I think from, the high level, it's hard to not feel good about a draft when they came away with JJ Weatherholt in the first round. Like, even if they bombed the rest of the draft, like, you still feel really good about the potential impact that Weatherholt is going to have at the major league level. I think that was a really good start. And then I think just looking at the rest of the draft, like, I mean, it's easy. Like, I can talk myself in to the guys they took in rounds 3 through 7, but it was really after round 7 that like pretty much every pick they made, I just loved. Yeah. Like they drafted so many really, really interesting prospects from round 7 through like literally the end of the draft, even to round 20, when a guy who can't throw a strike still has explosive stuff. Like, I think there's a very good chance that we see a couple players who come out of that like round 7 to 20 range and are at least making the major leagues and having some sort of an impact. And that's not something you see from every draft, but it's something the Cardinals have done well year over year over year. And I think they continued with that trend this year.
Yeah, I agree. They're all great points. Well, unfortunately, as much as I would like to sit here and talk for the next hour and a half about, complete and utter nonsense, I really would. We'll have to put it on hold. Again, guys, thank you so much. Kareem, tell everybody what's going on with you, what's on your mind, and where they can find you, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on a piece over at Redbird Rants, just highlighting each of the prospects the Cardinals selected. And yeah, just be on the lookout for that in the next coming weeks. You can follow me at Kareem SSN on X and Cardinals Prospects on Instagram.
Give it to us, Blakey.
Yeah, so like Kareem, I am also working on a series of articles highlighting the Cardinals picks at Viva Alberto's. I originally thought it was going to be 3 articles where I covered day 1, day 2, day 3, and then realized I was writing too many words, so I'm just going to be like 5 or 6 articles probably by the end of it. So I think I'm looking at rounds 11 through 15 posting tomorrow over at Viva Alberto's. So stay tuned for that, and absolutely make sure to read Kareem's stuff.
Awesome, guys. Well, for everybody at Prospects After Dark, everybody at Birds on the Black, for Kareem and for Blake, thank you for listening. If you're listening on the podcast or if you're watching on YouTube, I will do one last little cheers to everybody. If you guys have any booze or water, you want to raise your glass. To everybody who watched, thank you so much. And everybody who's listening, thank you. We'll take a little drink and we'll say thank you very much. And again, thanks for listening. Hopefully this is something that we can do here and there. We'd like to do it as frequently as news pops up at the very least. and maybe even weekly if we can make it work. We don't promise that, but it's something that we would love to try to provide when the opportunity presents itself. So stay tuned. Again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as always, happy hunting. Thank you, Blake and Kareem, because I don't know what's going to happen when I press this little end stream button. And I guess we'll find out. Goodbye. Oh, my God.